welcome from the IIT Alumni Center. I think you guys are aware that the IITM Incubation Cell and IIT Alumni Center is doing this series together. So thank you for all the support. I see some faces who have been coming here regularly. I see new faces, and I hope to see you guys going forward also. So today's session basically is going to be handled by R. Venkatakrishnan. Venkat, or RVK as he's known outside, does a lot of work with startups. He is a well-known chartered accountant. His firm handles a very wide range of, but I think his passion is for startups. So there are companies in the research park, in the incubation cell, for which Venkat's firm are the auditors. So he's doing it more because of the passion of working with youngsters rather than, the volume which will come out of that. He's also a very active member of TIE. Are you still TC member or stepped down? Or used to be in the governing council of TIE. Basically, I have arm twisted him, leveraged the fact that we are good friends for him to come and give this talk. On this subject, he has spoken widely outside. And I know what impact those talks have done. He has done sessions anywhere between 2 hours and 6 hours on this subject. So, or has it been longer also? I'm aware of the 6-hour sessions. Okay. So, there is, I think what we extract out of him today is dependent entirely on us. I would urge you to grill him. I would urge you to make this interactive so that we derive the maximum out of Venkat being here. And I can tell you with confidence, Venkat would welcome the question answer session so that it helps him to sort of interact more with all of you. With those few words, Venkat, thank you for accepting, and
good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, Gopal, for those kind words. I see a lot of young faces here. So, how many are still students? Good number. How many have already started up and on? Not many. How many have raised funds already for business? Lone hand. So then you should be speaking here. Anyway, see, the concept of a business plan is can be a little hard sometimes, especially late in the evening. But we can make it more interesting by getting into a interactive session. Now, if I tend to sort of go off and into a little more detail in terms of, or very high level, I would request you to take the liberty of putting your hands up and seeking clarification so that I come back down and then try to explain it to the best of my knowledge. So let us sort of make it interactive and see how we can this thing, because even though it's just a 2-hour session, I just packed in a lot more detail. The presentation is with Jaya, so there's nothing proprietary about it. So I have no problems in that being shared. So on that note, let's start. Now, we all tend to start looking at, when you start off, somebody tends to ask, what is your business model? Is it B2B or B2C? What is the preferred one? Huh? B2? Anyone else? I said, what is the preferred model? So you can, huh? You prefer? B2C. How many B2C? Put up hands. How many B2B? Okay. So the rest have not made up your minds. I'm happy about it because my preferred business model is back to basics. Because we tend to complicate a lot when we sort of get into these details, and somewhere down the line we sort of leave a lot of basics out of the picture, and then when questioned we start going back and then figuring out that, and then we have this nice jargon to go along with saying we pivoted our business model, we pivoted our this thing. So that's all nice to hear, but then at the end of the day the reality lies that somewhere down at the beginning of the whole exercise we lost sight of where we need to be, and therefore I say I have two basic rules which I follow, and I've been following that for the last 20-25 years, and it has not let me down. I call it the 3C's approach and the 4M's approach. Not mine originally, but I follow it because this 3C's I read it up in the book on business process reengineering way back in the 1995 or 96, where the 3C's of business, and you cannot lose sight of, and the extent of the vision that the person had at that particular point of time. He said the first is your customer. Don't lose sight of who your customer is. Whether it is B2C, B2B, whatever you want to call it, you call it. But at the end of the day, clearly define who your customer is. Because unless you define who your customer is, you will not understand what his requirement and expectation is, and in the absence of that, you will not be in a position to address his requirement. The second, who your competitors are. If you don't take care of your customer, your competitors will. So, and mind you, in today's context, with so much everybody is talking about innovation, disruption and all that, one aspect is competition need not necessarily come from known sources. Who actually threw the business of cameras out of, camera manufacturers out of business? Who threw them out of business? Mobile phones. So, if you start looking at who your competitors in the similar space are, you will possibly be taken by surprise because someone is going to come from somewhere else. And the third is, if there's anything that is permanent in business, it is change. So, customer, competition and change are the 3 C's that if you are an entrepreneur, you want to be in business, you cannot afford to lose sight of. And that I can share. Gopal said about my passion to be interacting with startups, because I keep telling everyone the amount of things that I learned from startups is amazing, because your thought process is absolutely different, because we belong to a different era. So there, at least now we start looking at what is the current thought process, and say, if this is the thought process of the entrepreneurs in future, how should I as a finance professional start looking and thinking? And that is how I start training myself. And next is the 4M's approach. Any business you need, I say you have to understand these 4M's. Men, machines, materials, and finally, many of you all are technical people, it is the methods. And coming from a finance guy, you must be surprised that I didn't use the money. Because money will find its way if you understand where the other 4, what the other importance of the other 4 is. Men, machines, materials and methods. If you didn't know how to address these 4 M's, any amount of money will only go down the drain. But if you know how to handle these 4 M's well, believe me, money will come in search of you. So don't go in search of money unless you have anchored yourself on the 4 core M's: men, machines, materials and methods. So 3 C's and the 4 M's are basics to any business. You must bring a lot of clarity in your thought process before you embark on any business at all. If you don't do that, you're going to suddenly find that you're halfway down, you've burnt a lot of money, more important, you've burnt a lot of time, spent a lot of time in the process, and then you suddenly find yourself you have to go back all the way and start all over again. So on that note, we'll get into a little more serious stuff. Now, business. Now, I always say that if you start a business, you must start it with a goal. Without a goal, no business will reach to. You can never plan for a business unless you know what your ultimate goal is. Once you have frozen the goal, then you get into what are the strategies that you're going to work with to achieve these goals. Then I want you all to remember this particular thing in between, because it's nice to start a business, nice to have a goal, big goal, but the bigger the opportunity, the bigger the risks. Don't ever forget the risks that your business is exposed to. And again, there also the 4 M's and the 3 C's will help you to determine what those risks are. Having identified those risks, determine what your policies and plans are going to be there. Then you get into your processes so that you start getting into the actual activities that you are working with. And finally, it is the metrics, because like in business and management, they say you cannot manage what you don't measure. Bring a numerical value to every activity, you are in a better position to manage it, because without a metric, when I say a metric, it need not be a financial metric. If it is, great. If it is not, that's not important. But whatever it is, unless you measure, you are not going to succeed in where you will not even know whether you are heading in the right direction or not. So if you are going to get into business, don't ever forget the hierarchy, your thought process and the basics in business, because all others will be of no use if you don't understand this. Now, the 3 core aspects of any business is essentially, assuming the core is obviously when you're talking of a core, you're talking of a customer and a product, but the operations of a business is represented by marketing, operations and finance. These are the core aspects that any business will have to deal with. All other activities are support, whether it is quality or whether it is HR, whether it is all maintenance, all these things will remain at the support activities, but this will represent your core. First one is customer facing, next one is your internal operations, and the third, finance, is how you are performing. So this will have to again remember these 3 elements in your business. Now, when you get into a business, the first thing is, what is your legal structure? That is very important, because when you are getting into business, you need to understand that what your legal entity is going to be very critical, because whether you raise funds from a bank or from anyone else, bank or private equity or venture capital or angel investment, whatever you call it, the entity that you are having is going to be very critical. The first and the most simplest of that is basically a proprietary concern. where you can call your business what you want. I could call my business Maruti Engineers, I could call it Amazon, but the person who owns it is no different from that's only the business name. You will remain to be a sole proprietor and you will be responsible for every activity or act of that business. There is no difference between your trade name and your you personally. So this is the most difficult part of this thing. So you decide whether you want to be a proprietary. Then you have what is called the partnership firm. Any two or more people who are adults and of sound legal mind can enter into a partnership. Now, the partnership is again a different legal entity from the partners. But then the partnership has a limitation in the sense that the liability of the partners is unlimited. Your business gets into problem, all your personal assets are also on the firing block. And it need not be in proportion to your share in the partnership firm, because we call it, what do you call it? The liability of the partners inter se is joint and several. So even though you may have only 5 or 10% of the business, if your other partners don't have any assets, you have assets which can settle all the 100% of the liabilities, then the liability will be yours. So that is one critical aspect. The third is what we call, because of the risk that the traditional firm had, we now have what is called a limited liability partnership. It is called a LLP, which is it has all the elements of a partnership, but one positive aspect is that the liability of the partners is limited to the capital that they have put into the firm. So and it has lesser of legal compliances. So for most young startups, we generally recommend of late you get into an LLP mode, unless you are going to quickly raise finance, then you need to go into a private limited company mode. But otherwise, if you see yourself for a long period in a very quiet operations, start in an LLP mode, then depending upon the activity business, you can go into a private limited company or otherwise. Now, whatever is the business, whether it is structure, whether it's a partnership firm or any other business structure, whoever is participating in it very clearly enter into a separate line of separate structure of getting into a promoter's agreement. But that will be very clearly determine what your rights mutually is, which it can also be part of the main document, but generally you don't want to communicate everything and anything to people at public at large. So you keep something, you want to keep it amongst yourselves, keep it as a promoter's agreement, because that will help you to resolve any problems at a later date. Now, I'm not suggesting that every business will have a problem, but what I'm saying is it is not uncommon for the original promoters, however mature they are. We can at some point of time we have to factor in that you may potentially disagree with your promoters, with your other friends who started it, and you should have a methodology to disengage smoothly without a problem, and that is where a promoter's agreement comes in very handy. Of late, I know many angel investors also tend to ask, do you have a promoter's agreement amongst yourselves? Because there must be a methodology to disengage also. We must be mature enough to say, yes, everything is hunky-dory, but there is also a possibility that we may want to disagree. If there is a disagreement, we should be in a position to part as friends. They should not be unmasked. So this is, and the structure is, whatever I am saying is how your business plan will also evolve, because the first, whatever I am saying, it necessarily will have to follow the same order, because whoever is reading your business plan will also be expecting to read it in a particular flow, because his thought process will be determined by these aspects, because a person looking at a proprietary concern will start looking at immediately the risks associated with it, and his evaluation of the plan will always be determined by what was the business structure. So it is better very critical to understand. That is why I start off saying that you please clearly articulate what your legal structure is. Now, I have known cases where even among, it is part of the family arrangement where businesses are started. Even there, even within a family, it is not out of place to have a family constitution. That is, may not be relevant to us as a startup, but nonetheless, I am making it I am actually saying that aspect also. Then, what is your business? And that is where I started off the B2B and the B2C. It is very critical that you articulate so that the reader, the person who is reading the business plan understands what business you are in. Now, and a word of caution here before I get into the other, go further is, at the end of the day, remember one thing. For me, the business plan is a book which should be your document for reference. It is not for others to read. If others are reading it, it is only incidental to your thought. This becomes your reference point. It can change any number of times. Your business plan can change any number of times. But if you document the change at every milestone that you had to review it and change it, then you will understand once at some point of time when you go through your past, you will understand where the turns and twists took place, and you will be able to be in a position to think in advance as, if I face these problems in the past, it's not going to be very difficult to face these in the future too. So it will definitely help you to determine how you can plan your action. So at the end of the day, please remember that your business plan document is your document. It is not intended for raising funds. It is not intended for a banker. It is not intended for an angel investor. It is not intended for private equity. You name anyone you want. If you don't have conviction in the document that you have prepared, nobody else will have. That is for certain. Then clearly say whether you are manufacturing, or whether you are servicing, or whether you are trading, or a combination of all of that. So articulate what your business is well in advance, so that the reader understands what he has to expect in the rest of the pages. Next. Now, what is your product? And finally, first thing that anybody is going to look at is, when they look at your product, they say, what is the problem that is it solving? Because that is critical, because without articulating that, people will not be in a position to understand what is the potential or estimated size of the market. What is the USP? Is it a Me Too product? Is it different from the others? How, if it is different, how is it different? The third, do you have or do you see a potential to have some patents, trademarks, or copyrights? Now, this is very critical, because there is a legal aspect to it. Because if you don't have a protection, then there is no barrier from somebody copying it. So if you are starting, even the name of your firm, even the name, the styling of your firm, the color combination, anything and everything, the font that you use, all of them are capable of being protected. Because today we may think it is not important, but at a later point of time, when somebody starts copying you, you will suddenly realize that you don't have protective mechanisms. So I would very strongly urge each one of you all to, even if it's a small name, and if such of those who are starting a business, please go and first thing after you have formed your legal entity, go and register in the MSME with the portal. It is called Udyog Aadhar. Please go and register there. because once you register there, the advantage will be that even for registering patents and trademarks and copyrights, the government offers a lot of concessions. Many of us want to start to do a lot of business, but we don't understand how much relief and benefits the government is giving to small and medium enterprises. So if you want to take advantage of it, you must do a fair amount of research of what the government is offering to young small businesses like many of you all are starting. Then whether it is a standardized product or is it a customized, made to order or on specifications. So these are again the next level of drill down that you need to start looking at. So in terms of, again, specify what your product is, what is the problem that it is solving, then go down to the other technical details associated with it. Next. Location. Where are you going to be in business? That is also critical, because if somebody wants to come and visit your factory or office, they need to know where your business exists. Shouldn't be a case where they'll have to call you up and say, where is your office? I tell you, then no, you need to be very clear. Where does it exist? Who owns it? Do you own it? Is it rented? What is the tenure of the lease? Because suppose the reason why I am saying even this tenure of lease is important is, suppose I go and say, I want to start up a restaurant business. Okay, I want to start a restaurant business. And the first thing that I'll go and ask is, okay, what about where are you going to locate the restaurant? So I'm going to locate it on say Anna Salai. Do you own it? No. Do you have a lease? Yes, sir. What is your lease? 2 years. Do you think anybody would seriously look at your business? Your business may be the best, but restaurant business is primarily dependent on the place where you are operating from. And if you say I have only a 2-year lease for it, how on earth will you succeed? So these questions will bound to come up, because the person who is evaluating, and when you put these in your own business plans and you start putting it, you'll suddenly realize, no, what is the risk associated with having a tool, or what is the risk that I don't even have a location from where I'm operating from. Both you have to answer. What is the management team? How balanced is it? Is it too much on marketing, or is there a balance between marketing, operations, finance? If I don't have all of them, how do you propose to acquire them? Not necessary that you must have everybody in your team here and now. It's possible that I could have some advisors on certain aspects. It's possible that I could get this manufactured outside. Fair enough. No questions asked. But articulate it and stipulate it so that people understand that yes, in the initial stages this is going to be light, this is going to be this way. So there are implications, there are advantages, there are disadvantages. Every decision that you take will have its advantages and will have its disadvantages. The advantages you don't have to harp, but you have to be prepared to address the disadvantages, because the disadvantages inevitably will start staring at your face at some point of time or the other as surprises or risks that your business is exposed to. Okay? Next. So, so is the speed okay? Is it you're able to, because I'm still handling the easier stuff at this particular point of time. Anyone having questions, doubts, please come, because then it will start picking up pace and we'll start dealing with more complicated issues. Any questions so far?
Regarding the location thing that you said, so normally the registered offices will be at some place, maybe some kind of house and all. So the location that you're saying, that will be the branch office.
Where your core operations are. Registered office is primarily in a place where it is intended for legal disputes, for documents to reach and things like that. You need not even operate from that place. Yes. But where your operations will exist, core business, where will it operate from? If you are a marketing organization, where will you be operating from? If you are a manufacturing company, where will your factory be located in? If you are a trading company, where is your warehouse going to be located? How will you distribute it? So you need to talk about your location with reference to your core of your business. Registered office is only that can remain permanent. You don't have to change it. That also need not be permanent. You can change the registered office any number of times. Yeah.
Regarding the trademark or copyright for the name of the business. Regarding the trademark or copyright, so once let's say we get some trademark, so for let's say we change the font or the color, so each and every time should we update?
Yes.
So how does that work?
Yes, yes. That trademark and copyrights or any changes will have to be updated. You get
Okay.
get a fresh.
Just a question on the company structure thing that you were talking about. With the way current lending practices work in terms of personal guarantees and all of those things, is there anything which is really limited liability in that manner?
See, once the moment you give a personal guarantee, you see there are two. See, it can be an omnibus personal guarantee, or it could be a guarantee restricted to a particular asset.
True.
So, okay, suppose I have a piece of land. I can say I can giving this land as a security to it, but my guarantee is restricted to this land. It does not cover other areas. So, from that perspective, yes, you don't have to. But the moment you give a guarantee, it partakes
so,
the.
Because most banks ask for a director's guarantee, whatever it is.
I think we're getting sidetracked. So this is technically not a part of, we don't talk of personal guarantees in a business plan. And I'm still to know of a startup giving personal guarantees on a lighter note. So that I think will come in at a much later stage. Anyhow, we can discuss this offline. I'm not trying to brush you off.
Fair enough. So the team, what is the ownership structure? If there are 3 or 4 of y'all, what is the share of the firm that each one is having? What is the board? Who are the advisors? Who are the key executives? All this is critical. Maybe in a startup case, this page may be largely blank. It may be only 1 or 2 people. So be it. But you remember that you need to update this as we progress, because this is, as I said, this is a document that you will use for your own purpose moving forward, so that every time there changes in it, you keep updating it. Next. Now, then when you are looking at the business and the product, understand the regulatory framework within which you are going to operate, because that is extremely critical, because your business will have to be in compliance with the laws of the land. And for me, I always look at it from easy way to remember the flow of regulatory requirement is there are some laws which are applicable to the products or services that you are engaging in. So understand what are the laws relating to that. Then there are some laws that are applicable to the operations. That's why I said the methods. Now, you will have to check, because the Factories Act, for instance, has a lot of specifications, whether it is the Factories Act or the Shops and Establishment Act or any other, even if you are in the healthcare, the Clinical Establishment Act. There are a lot of operational regulations that you have to comply with. Environment.
I noticed a lot of you are actually writing it down. This would be available for you if you want later. We concentrate on the discussion rather than. Sorry.
So, there will be a lot of these legal requirements that you understand, because and you keep updating it, because I have seen, for me, after 35 years of business, there's some innocuous law that is there applicable in some place, where we forget that the existence of these laws, and somebody comes and serves a notice for that. No, so therefore, please go ahead and understand, that's why I said, there are laws relating to men, what type of men, when they can work, who can work, if there are ladies, what type of working hours. If there are laws applicable for everything. Materials, there are laws even on usage of specific material. Actually, when we are just this thing, when Krish was telling me about one startup which is going to deal with methane, the moment I heard that word, I said you'll have to be careful, because there are laws relating to that, because the way you process that to to derive it will be is a subject matter of a legal requirements, because we have known cases where there are fatalities associated with the handling of it. So please understand what are the laws relating to your operations. The taxation structure, because the taxation structure you need to understand, because there is a taxation structure on what you buy and what you sell. And today, after the last year, they introduced the GST. There are some inputs that you can take credit and you cannot take credit. So you understand your cost structure is going to be determined by the inputs and output taxation structure. So you need to understand what the taxation structure is going to be. Then on the income, on the expenditure, whether there are local issues, local taxes. For now there are much less on that, because in some cases there are some local levies and things like that. But you need to understand the taxation structure. And FEMA, as I said, this is one place where many startups get into problems without knowing of its existence itself. Any transaction that has remittance or receipt of money from outside India comes within the purview of the Reserve Bank of India guidelines, which is articulated in the Foreign Exchange Management Act. It's called FEMA guidelines. You need to definitely understand what the requirements are, because you people start doing something and get into problems, and Reserve Bank does not distinguish between startup and big companies. They come down on you like a ton of bricks, and at that particular point of time it wipes out your business. I have known many people, we had to close down some businesses and start it afresh in some other name just to ensure that the Reserve Bank doesn't come screaming behind these companies. So anything to do with foreign exchange, India is very particular about it. Please don't fiddle around on that. Next. Then once you have done that, define the market size. The market size, please don't come back and say India has a population of 1.3 billion and therefore my market is so big. Nobody will believe you. You need to understand it in the context of what you are proposing to do, where you are going to target, where your customers exist. So define the market with reference to that. Evaluation of the market has to be with reference to your business. Don't take up macroeconomic conditions and say there are so many people, so many things. So if you're going to operate in Chennai and you think your initial market is going to be South Chennai, go and understand that South Chennai market before you start discussing about the product. So that is the way you build up by block by block by block. Don't start off with the world has 7 billion population and therefore this is my market, and nobody will find it very attractive, because they will say you're talking of a business yes, everybody, nobody disputes or denies that, but try to understand what you can tap and hit in the next 2 to 3 years. In my opinion, nobody bothers to read anything which is said beyond 3 years. Yes, they may ask you what is your 5-year perspective, 7-year perspective, all that is okay. But the focus is, for me, it's 3 years. If I survive 3 years, we'll take a rolling 3 years. Every 3 years, we'll determine if we are going to be in business or not. That is, first year, first to 3, second year, 2 to 4, 3 to 5. So move on. Every 3 years, you go on a rolling way so that you have a fairer understanding of where your business is going to head towards. Now, if there are any external surveys which you can substantiate which can help you to substantiate your thought process, quote it, record it, include it, because everybody is very happy looking at external surveys. If you have done personal research, or if you have done a market survey, great. How you have done it, whether it has been independent, there is no bias, all that you have to document it well. Is there any seasonality to your product or market? Because that also is important. But suppose you say my market is only for 5 months in a year, the question will come up is they'll not ask you what will you do for the next 7 months. They'll be more bothered saying how will you incur the expenditure for the next 7 months. Your income is for 5 months, what will you do for the next 7 months? Because the expenditure is for 12 months. You cannot say I will open my office for 5 months, shut it at the end of the 5th month, and then go. That tells I don't want to deal with such a business. No. For instance, I know, it's not out of place, if you go to Goa, I know there's at least about 60% of the hotels open only in October and shut by 15th of April, and they say, okay, we are done and dusted. For 6 months they don't do anything. But that's a separate type of this thing. But if you getting into that type of a business, you then understand where your problems are going to be. What is your customer acquisition approach? You notice that I am not getting into anything relating to finance so far. I have not even told anything about finance. I have not said, I have not given even a statement of where you are, anything about the money. The reason is, when you are talking of business, unless your basics are in place, you will not reach the financial part. If you start with the financial and don't look at all these issues, you can be rest assured it's going to bomb on your face. Your customer acquisition strategies. What is your go-to-market? How do you propose to market? How do you propose to acquire customers? How do you propose to retain customers? How do you propose to grow these customers? What are the implications? All that you will have to start discussing in your this thing. Once this is your business plan, you need to put it in place, have it with you. What you share with anybody else is your prerogative. You don't have to necessarily go and give the whole business plan to any person who comes and meets you. You have to exercise discretion on that, because that is the business plan that you prepare is your baby. You need to have it close to yourself as far as possible. Don't disclose in full. Even if you are disclosing in full, it is not out of place to even get a non-disclosure agreement from somebody. Because if he copies it, what is your protective mechanism? So your customer acquisition strategy is very, each of this is a session by itself. I am only saying that you have to focus on all these parts, because at the end of the day, these are all parts will form part of your business plan. Now, if there are existing businesses, what are existing relationships? Whether there is a new product, whether you are addressing adjunct markets, adjunct products, all this you will have to start looking at it. And this is this never let me down. As the ABC analysis, let me tell you, I start my exercise, any exercise I will first do is an ABC analysis. For me, I say A comprises of all those people who account for 65% of my business. B is the next 25%. C is the last 10%. I must hang on to the A like my life. Because if even 5-10% of that customers move out of what is in the A category, it can make a difference between your existence and closure. Because it's 7%, 6.5-7% of your business, and that 6.5-7% will actually determine whether you are making profit or loss. If you imagine the same 10%, if I lose from C, it's 1% of my business, it will not make a difference. But in the absence of this prioritization of this ABC analysis, what we do is we tend to focus on the C category sometimes more and leave out the A, and the A suddenly finds yourself, you are not focusing on him, he leaves you and goes off, and suddenly you find your business is collapsing just like a pack of cards. So ABC, whether it is material, whether it is men, whether it is machines, whichever you look at it, this ABC never has let me down. Immediate first thing I look at it when I put a grid is I will understand where is my business coming in, where is my materials coming in, who are my key people, who are my key machines, and then I will start, okay, now I am in a better fix about this. No, suppose you are dealing with you're looking at a market and say, okay, and say Chennai is you're looking at a whole chain. 65% of your business is coming from Anna Nagar, and imagine if you have your operations in South Chennai. What are the chances that you will succeed? So I need to understand. Otherwise, I still have to operate only from South Chennai, I need to have somebody sitting there close to the customers, so that if there is a necessity, that person goes there quickly and addresses the requirement. So for me, I have always found this ABC is very effective, whether it is collections, payables, whatever it is. Now, if I have to collect 100 rupees from my customers, I will focus on the A category customers, because that is where the big money comes. The moment the big money comes, I can resolve a lot of my problems. If I go chasing behind the sea, if I collect even 100% of the sea, I will get only 10%. So prioritization is a very important facet of an entrepreneur, whether it's startup or whether you are the most seasoned businessman on earth, you have to necessarily prioritize. And this ABC is a very, very effective tool to prioritize. And what are your when you are getting into customers, what are your service level agreements that you are entered into with your customers? If you say that you are committing yourself to certain conditions of the sale or service or whatever it is, please document it, because the customer should know what you have agreed and you also should know what you have committed yourself. Okay? Next. Competition. Because if you are in a market that is big, your competition is also big, then you need to figure out how you are going to be different from the competitors. Like they say, if you don't take care of your customers, your competitors will. So where is your competitors? Are they existence today, or will they come at a later point of time? Because of technology, as I said, they are having so many disruptions that are taking place. Where is your competition going to come? You need to understand that very clearly, because if you don't know who your competitors are, you will be caught with surprises. So and think of all potential competitors who can come in, whether it is by industry or by name or whoever it is. Please put it down, please record it. At a later point of time, you keep reviewing it, you will be able to understand how you need to re-strategize your business with reference to that. Next. Pricing. Very important. How are you proposing to price your product? Pricing is never an easy job. Even for known, very seasoned businesses, we always have this: did we underprice or did we overprice? This is a question that there are so many times that I have had. One of the questions that we have had in discussions with many young companies: sir, we went and bid for 10 companies, sir, we got 8 of them. You feel elated. I said, you got 8 of them. Is there another story that you want to see? Is it possible that you have underbid, whereas all your competitors are charging higher? That you have to look. So pricing is again is a session by itself, but price is never written on stone. You have to be flexible to change your prices depending on the market conditions, business, and there are some financial aspects which I will be discussing a little later on that, because those are very key aspects of pricing. But pricing strategies you have to very clearly document and articulate. And if your pricing is a function of the taxation structure that the product or either the material or the inputs are subject to, you need to understand it very clear. Because I have known many companies who have not understood the taxation structure of the value chain or the inputs, and suddenly when that has changed, they are not aware of it. They are committing themselves to the customer at the old price, and when they are receiving materials from their vendors and things like that, the prices are totally different. The reason the taxation structure has changed. So understand that part. Then this is part of all the macros part of it. Now coming down to the specific of your project itself. Any questions up to now? Because what we have discussed so far is more about the general issues and may not have been specific to your business itself. But from now onwards, you will suddenly find that getting a lot more drill down is coming specifically onto your business.
Regarding the ABC analysis, that's good. So in that you need to be in that particular field for quite a long time to understand that.
Not required, no. And we are not talking of a trend. At any point of time, if I am due to receive 1 lakh of rupees from a number of customers, I need to do an ABC. Even if for instance, even when you're trying to market and you find your inquiries coming from a particular, if you start doing an ABC analysis of those inquiries, you know you'll get a feel of where your potential market is coming from. Any data is capable of being analyzed that way. So, do I take it that you don't have any questions so far? Sure. Now, what is the project and how much is it going to cost? Because the funding of that is a separate part, because first you need to understand what your project is going to be. Now, I used a generic one saying show land and building separately, because I'm not trying to suggest that you startups is going to buy land and building and construct it at this particular point of time. But many of you all may going into a rented or leased premises specify, because there's an advance associated with that. You'll have to articulate that particular. Then how much is your margin for working capital? Suppose you are, what is your working capital? What do you understand by working capital? Okay, operating expenses, some part of the operating expenses, fair enough. Anything else? Materials consumption, you'll have to keep something in stock. Inventory you'll have to keep. What else?
How much loss you can bear?
That is loss you can bear. See, nobody is going to fund you by losses. Fair enough. You have.
Unless you have to start.
Yeah. Losses you can bear. Then, in which case, you need to factor in. See, for me, losses are all part, in my opinion, all pre-operative, because every business has to become profitable. If your business is not self-generating for more than 2 to 3 years, you can't. It's not a sustainable business. Everybody is increasingly realizing it now. You cannot go on saying that it's going to be future. This is customer acquisition cost. I'm going to build it up in future. There has to be some point where it has to start generating adequate revenue to meet your basic costs. So your receivables, again, when you sell, nobody is going to give you cash immediately. So norm of the industry is at a gross level, that is your receivables, your inventory, your 2 or 3 months working expenses, your working capital cycle. This represents your core working capital. At a minimum, what the expectation is, 25% of that gross will have to be funded by you from long-term sources, because that represents your core working capital, and you will have to factor. You cannot assume that the bank. No, I am saying minimum. Okay. So this margin will vary. At a minimum, you will have to provide for 25%. If you are getting funding and things like that, if you don't get funding and things like that, you may have to provide higher and higher amount. Now, this is the core. Now, it's possible that your vendors or whoever may be willing to fund you for some time and say, you pay me after realization, things like that. But you need to understand from your perspective how much working capital that you will require, assuming that nobody is willing to fund you. If somebody is willing to fund you, great. Now, that's a separate part. If you want to start at a base level, assuming that nobody is going to fund you, you will have to provide for some working capital. Provide for contingencies. Don't assume that there will be no surprises. Whatever is your cost of project, if you say I want to provide contingencies 50%, then if I were to be reading the project report, I will say you don't even know where you are going to incur the expenditure, you want to provide 50%. Norm is anywhere from 5 to 7% contingencies. Okay, if you want to be very liberal, sometimes you allow 10%. More than 10%, if you say, I don't know where I'm going to spend or why I'm going to incur, that means the first question I say is, boss, you don't even know where your business, what money your business requires and where you may require it from. How do you expect me to look at it? Whether it is whoever it is, as an investor, as a financier, whatever you want to do. You need to have that clarity. Pre-operative expenses, before your business starts generating any revenue, you will require to you may have to employ a few people, you may have to incur some expenditure in survey, you may have to prepare a project report, you may have to meet some people, you may do a survey, whatever it is, all that will have to be adequately and appropriately funded. Now, or at least decided, because if you don't specify what that amount is, you will not know how you are going to fund it, because you can't keep incurring expenditure, because this will be a budget against which you are incurring expenditures. This is actually only your budget. Your business project cost is your budget. If you don't have a budget, you will not know where you are going, where you are spending, and you lose control. Even if you are developing a website, then you understand whether you want to do as a static, active, or passive, all that you want to go, this thing factor in and put what amount you are hoping to spend. Don't keep adding to your project cost without a budget. And what is your project implementation plan, Gantt chart? When you will do what, and what are the milestones? What are the activities that are dependent? What are independent? Now, all this, why we emphasize on this is because time has money implications. If you are taking a long project and your project cost does not factor in all this, we'll immediately ask, where is this money going to come from? So your project and project cost of the project and the project plan needs to be extremely clear. Next. Then how do you fund it? Now, the first for a startup we always say is the 3 F's. You know who the 3 F's are? Huh? Friends, families, and fools. Now, even to determine who that fool is, you need to plan. That bakra has to be found, no? He's not going to be walking on the road. So, I know Gopal has funded quite a few startups, but I'm not. So, but the point is, you have to understand where you are going to fund it from. Equity, startup, somebody comes and tells you, I'll invest in your business, I want 50% of your share. You know, in desperation, sometimes many startups, somebody is giving me, I'll take 50% from him. Take it. But then, if you have already given away 50% of your business to somebody, where are you going to get how will you raise the money in the future? Then you'll suddenly find that 70% of your business is owned by somebody else, or even 70 to 8% is owned by somebody else, and you are owning 20%, and that is when the dissolution starts coming. Why should I work for, I'm only 15-20%, all my business somebody else is owning, and that means I'm working for somebody else. I could have taken up a job and gone, I would have earned more. Yeah, correct, true. So that is why you need to, at the initial stages, you need to be absolutely tight. And you will be tight only if your project cost is tight, your project plan is tight. Once you expand, when you expand, you get the monies in at an appropriate point of time, because that will be easier for you to get the monies also. You start thinking very big, then you start diluting, then what will happen? You will start cutting corners, you will start doing things that you shouldn't be doing, you will start taking money without telling him. All that biggest problem in business is to have these problems. So decide from an early stage how much you are going to dilute. Even if you are taking money from the family, document it clearly and say when you are going to give it back. Especially. Because, see, if you tell that don't expect interest for the next 3 years, 4 years, good, I don't want to. But don't promise and then not pay. in business, everything is to be documented. Like we say, in God we trust, rest is data. So for us, rest is documents. So where your money is going to come, what is your repayment, how it is going to repay, where your cash flows. I will discuss about all that, but this you need to understand it. What is how much does your, because all this will have a bearing on how you run your business. Next. Now, maybe this is, since it's most of it is startups, I'll skip this and I'll come back to this at a later point of time on this, because I don't want to. Now, this is where now I'm getting into hardcore financial statements that you are preparing. Now, usually what happens is people prepare like this: revenue from operations, other income, expenses, profit before exceptional item, profit. This is how you'll see most of the financial statements. Nobody will understand anything out of it. If you prepare it like this, no person, including yourself, you will not understand what the business is. So this is a legal way to prepare it. If you go and ask somebody else to prepare it, they will look at the format somewhere else, and this is how they will prepare it. So one thing I will tell you is, please don't follow this method. There are some things that the government stipulates that is not intended for startups, that is not intended if you are looking at your own financial statements. So if you ever see such statement, put it into the closest, nearest dustbin that you have seen. Next. Now, if you are truly a entrepreneur, a business person, what I would like to see is, A, what is your sales? What is my variable cost? What do you understand by variable cost? It is linked to unit of sale. Suppose you sell something or you produce something, you incur that. If you don't sell, don't produce, you don't incur that. That is very clear. You must understand that if you have to have a very clear grip on the variability of cost, because the next couple of slides which I will be discussing has a lot of implications on this variability of variable cost. Now, and there is another reason why I will also want to discuss. I was telling you about your pricing strategies, because your pricing strategies will have to be based upon this structure only, because you will have the flexibility to price within this. Then direct costs that are fixed in nature. What are these? All people who are actually operating for the production, or who are incurred, whether I am saying my production, it's the service, all your service guys who are in the business. Their salary is not per unit basis, it is fixed. Whether you produce 1 unit, 10 units, 100 units, up to a certain level it is fixed. Then only it starts varying based either on the structure you have this thing, what it is. Then what is your marketing and selling expenses? Marketing and selling also to an extent is variable. There is some element which is fixed, there is a lot of it in marketing and selling also which is variable. Suppose discount. You give a discount. Sometimes even people say, let me reduce it here itself, because I am interested in what is the net revenue I earn. If I am selling something at 100 and I am giving a discount of 30, I am not bothered. 70 is what my earnings is. I no point looking at the MRP of 100 and saying I am selling it at 100, because what I realize is only 70. So then this comes to your admin. What are all other expenses which don't have a direct bearing on the product or its marketing part of it? All others will come. This is more in the nature of general overheads, which you will have no bearing at all on your business. Then you will say, these are my costs. Then I will come back, A minus F is my EBITDA, where EBITDA is earnings before interest, depreciation, tax and amortization. Then you look at what my depreciation is, because depreciation is a non-cash expenditure. You are amortizing the cost of the asset over a longer period. But then to believe that a depreciation is a non-cash is also slightly of a problem, because many people commit the mistake. And if you provide for depreciation, what happens? I am building it into my expenditure. So that money should be available. You keep accumulating that money, you can replace the equipment or buy a newer, bigger equipment. People tend to look at it as saying non-cash, non-cash, and forget about that it was they had originally invested that. If you have taken a loan, actually it is this depreciation which will help you to repay that loan. Because this is money in your hand, so you go and give it back to the bank as or somebody from whom you have borrowed. So don't lose sight of the depreciation part of it. Then you have the interest, then the profit before tax, then income tax, and this. This is an ideal statement which entrepreneurs should focus on. Don't look at the conventional financial statements. That is for the legal people, that is for the statutory people. You have no bearing on you. That you leave it to the person who is filing your returns or complying with your requirements. That really does not help you. But from an entrepreneur perspective, you need to understand what your variable costs are and what your fixed costs are. Next. Now, when you are looking at, this is I am talking about unit level, but when you are preparing a financial statement, there is only one thing I want you all to see. Cash is reality, profit is a matter of opinion. Turnover is vanity. Boss, I am having 1 crore sales, good, you feel good. All that is good. Profit is sanity. If you are making money, good. Cash is king. Boss, paisa pocket level. At the end of the day, we need to know, we are making money, I need to see if my money is in my pocket or not. If you are not making, my money is not there in your pocket, that means your profit is only perception, it is not a reality. So ensure that don't ever lose sight of whether I am making profit or not. First thing at the end of the day, see whether you are, I can sell it on credit, no harm done. But then, like they say, a sale is never complete till you realize your money. You got a contract, you got a methodology to you agreed, the person has agreed. But till that money comes, you are actually, till the money comes, he is in a better position because your product is with him. Now you have incurred the expenditure, he is enjoying the benefits of it. So if I personally were given a choice, I say at an early stage, take 5-10% less than on your price, get the money ahead. Because if you are even better, if the person can give you some advance, take that advance, because you are getting him also to commit himself to your business. Next. Now, when you are doing business, you need to understand there is something called what is my unit contribution. This is a number. This is linked to the variable cost that I have. For instance, suppose we are selling a product which is at 1,000 rupees. Now, my variable cost, if I am assuming that I am having material 200 rupees, I am incurring labor 200 rupees, my variable cost is 400, my contribution is 600. This is for you a very critical this thing, because immediately first thing they will ask, some people will say contribution, some people will call it gross profit, what they call it is not this thing, but you need to, as a business, if you are in business, you need to understand what is the contribution that I am making per unit. You go and ask any investor today, he'll start talking, say, what is your unit economics? How many of you all have been confronted to that question? Huh? Somebody's asked you? Yes. So this is the unit economics that people are. What is your contribution? Why is this contribution important? Is it that does it have a bearing? Yes, it does have a bearing. I will explain you why. Next. Now, this figure of contribution is very critical for us to determine where I break even and where I make a profit. Let's take a situation here. Look at the middle case. Okay. Now my variable cost is say 12 lakhs. I made sales of 30 lakhs. I had a fixed cost of 18 lakhs. So I make a nil. I make no profits, no loss. Okay. That is my break-even point. That is what every organization should first strive to get to. Now, What happens if I move one step this side of I make a sale of only 25 lakhs, not 30 lakhs. See the impact here? It gets into a loss. Now, instead of 30 lakhs, I make 35 lakhs. See, I make a profit of 3 lakhs. If you see it, it's only about 15-17% increase in sales or reduction in sales, but see the impact it can make. It can swing you from loss to profit. Now you understand why I was talking about that ABC. If 1-2 our customers just knock off from your top end, suddenly you find that your sales has dropped by 15%, it can go to swing you to a loss situation. So it's very critical that I understand this break-even point, and to understand where my break-even is, I need to understand what my variable cost is and what my fixed cost is. If you don't understand your variable cost and fixed cost, you are in problems. You need to take decisions. If your variable cost is going up, that means you have to increase your price here, or you need to reduce your fixed cost. If you don't do these two things, your business is in trouble. If you don't have the ability to increase your prices, then you must be working overtime to cut down your fixed costs. If you don't, you will be running into problems. You understand this? Because this is I'll tell you, if I have seen very seasoned businessmen who have been in business, but they're operating out of instinct and gut. But when I ask them this question, they themselves are they grapple with it for some time, and then they come back and say, okay, now I understood. But if you don't understand it at this stage, when you're early in your business thought process, if you don't understand the implications of this contribution to variable cost and your break even, you will have serious problems. It's not an accountant's responsibility. It is your responsibility as business persons to understand this. Because it is that responsibility, because accountant will give you the numbers, but you have to take the business decision. Next. So always don't ever lose sight of what your gross profit is. That is your contribution. At no point of time you should lose sight of that. I'll come back, maybe if time permitting, I'll come back to this a little later and come back and explain these ratios. But I definitely want you all to remember this particular this thing. I'll come back to this at a later point of time when I finish the rest of the issues. Now, please also include in your project plan a very detailed SWOT. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, which is essentially your risks that you are exposed at business. Now, the other thing we say is also don't lose sight of the political, economic, social and technology changes that you're having, and also, if required, for larger ones, the environmental and legal ones, because today there is a lot of aspects that people tend to jump and talk about environmental issues and things like that. So you get straight down into the business, then there are environmental and legal issues, and suddenly you have to change your location or shut your shop, or you have to change your material. There are so many associated complications associated with it. Don't leave it. Then your key competitors, as that I mentioned to you, what are your accreditations and certifications? Today many products that you have to have mandate either having a product certification or a quality certification or accreditation. Otherwise you cannot be in business. You are not supposed to sell the product in, and that is now last week Government of India has also constituted a national board for standards. It's going to become more and more difficult, because we have seen in India that quality of products is not being considered very taken too seriously, so they are trying to bring in a lot more. So please don't forget accreditations and certifications, including, because I want you all to understand that I know many startups at very start this thing tend to import components from China, Taiwan and other places. Now I have also known there that the product gets stuck at the port because that the component that they material that they have imported is not does not have a standards reference Indian this thing. Till that standard reference is available, they don't allow the clear the customs don't allow the products to come into the country, and you have paid the money, you are dependent on it, so don't ever get into that. So please understand this, accreditations and certifications are not just for your product, but sometimes it has a legal implications also, because Government of India mandates certain things cannot be brought into India without an appropriate or equivalent BIS certification equivalent. So look at that aspect also. Then sensitivity analysis. What happens to you? What if in your business? What if the market goes up? What if the market collapses? What if the prices go up? What if your raw material prices go up? What if your fixed costs go up? These are things that you cannot afford to lose. Any person whom you take a project report will first ask you saying, what is your sensitivity on your, have you done a sensitivity analysis on your financials? I'll explain to you what are these things next. Yeah. Now, look at this. You have two products, assuming that you have two products. You look at the variable cost changes in the two, assuming that these are the same. You have fixed cost, you have profit. Now you see what happens here. A 10% increase in sales. This 150 has gone up to 167. Now this percentage will remain the same. It is a percentage. Now this, if you look the 6750 here, it is in proportion it has gone up. So this fixed cost will remain the same, because fixed cost by definition does not change. Now you see that what is an 18% profit has now become a 22% profit. Now here you come down to this side, you see what happens if there is a 10% increase in the decrease in variable cost. 6750 has come down to 60.75, exactly 10% it has come down. If you look at it, this is cost a swing of 24%, it has come down this thing. So your profits will change based upon this increase in the cost, or assuming that this does not change. But if this changes at any point of time, there will be an impact here. That is why the importance of fixed cost, variable cost, and your contribution is very, very, very critical. So people will first immediately, they'll always ask you, when you go with financial statements, please do a sensitivity and come back. What happens if costs go up by 10%? What happens if selling prices come down by 10%? What happens if volumes come down by 10%? So they will ask you to work on multiple sensitivities associated with your project. So this is again something that has to form part of your plan. Now go back to that financial key indicators. Up. No, yeah. Some of the ratios that I look at is, this is related, we look at what is the profitability ratios, then we look at the asset realization ratios. One of the things that they will look at is what is your return on capital employed, because that for many people is a very key number. What is your profit before interest as a percentage of your total capital employed? Many people evaluating projects usually use a cut-off percentage of 20% or return on capital employed. They use a cut-off. If it is less than 20%, they don't even look at it, because they say it does not offer growth potential. So minimum your return on capital employed should be, then this is, they'll look at what is your break-even point. Debt service coverage ratio. What is debt service coverage ratio? Can somebody say what you understand from the term debt service coverage ratio? This is critical, especially if you are going to banks. What do you understand with the term debt service coverage ratio? essentially, if you borrowed money and paying it in installments or whatever it is, how much of your installment is covered by the profits that you are earning. So they will look at it and saying, what is your profit after tax plus interest plus depreciation divided by what is the principal amount that you have to pay plus interest, and see if it is greater than at least 1.7 or 1.8. They will look at minimum 1.7. The more it is, it will give comfort. Very high, they will say not possible. Again, when we see numbers itself, we will tell you whether these numbers are feasible or not. So average that a minimum they will expect is over a 3 or a 4 year period, over the term of the loan, usually they will expect at least a 1.7, because that is the amount of risk that you, even if the sales goes down by 10%, they will know, okay, my debt service coverage ratio does not come below 1.2, 1.3, I am comfortable. That's how they will look, sensitize and see it at that particular point of time. So your debts, because they look at, say, okay, what if interest rates go up by 2%? Whether you will be in a position to service, you are assuming that you are not able to increase your selling price, anything, all other things remain without a change. What will be the impact? So your debt service coverage ratio, DSCR, over a project should at least be 1.7, otherwise you will not find people willing to lend. What is the project IRR? IRR, how many people understand IRR? Have you heard of the term IRR? Internal rate of return. Basically, what IRR uses is financially we use what we call as, there is a time value of money. I will give you a small example. Suppose I have a potential to earn 10% interest on and I have to receive 100 rupees. If I have to receive 100 rupees 1 year down the road, how much will you accept and be indifferent towards it? Because on other things I receive the same amount of money. How much will I require to invest today if I have to pay 100 rupees to 1 year down the road at 10% interest? How much? If I have to pay 100 rupees on 1st April 2019, I have to pay 100 rupees with 10% interest. How much should I put in my bank today? Huh? 91. So if I have 91 today or 100 rupees 1 year down the road, you are indifferent? Correct? So use the same analogy and say, if I have to receive 100 2 years down the road, it should be equivalent to at least 81 today. So basically, there is a time value of money. If I give it, instead of giving it to you, if I deposited the money, if I get the same amount, so I should be in a position to get a rate which is higher than that minimum, what we call as a risk-free rate of return. Any person who is evaluating funding will look at what is my cutoff rate. We use generally, there is a methodology to arrive at that also, but every person will have a cutoff rate. If my project does not satisfy an IRR of 12-13%, I will not invest in it. If you go to PEs and VCs, they will talk of an IRR not less than 25%. 25 for them is a basic cutoff rate. Anything less than 25%, they will not even look at it. Then the sensitivity analysis, what happens, goes up and down, all this you will have to some of the key ratios, this is basically a financial this thing, but you will get evaluated on this. There are many more others that you can look at it, but from a point of view of some basic ratios that people tend to look, first thing is, I always look at it, okay, gross profit, what is it, what is my profit before tax, what is my IRR, what is my sensitivity. Some people even crude, they look at it as, what is my payback? If my project cost is say 1 crore, how many years does it take to recover that 1 crore? I'll say, okay, it takes a 5-year payback. That's what it will cover. Suppose I say my cumulative profit for 5 years after tax is equal to 1 crore, I will say, okay, my payback will take me minimum 5 years. Payback is 3 years, okay, this project appears to be less risky. Payback is 8 years, boss, I don't want to touch it. So people use, there I'm indifferent towards the time value of money. I'm just looking at a pure number and saying how long is it going to get my money back. But the more the more professional investors will start looking at your IRRs and your cash flows and things like that. So that is where it becomes very critical for your project to satisfy all those norms. The front. Then, no, go move. Maybe stopped. I moved back, no? So, we, like for instance, some of the other things, in the risk categories, we start looking at what is, because this risk is also, it in your good this thing, if you are presenting a project, to include the risk also, to say where is your, what are the type of risks, the strategic risk, project risk, operational risk, financial risks, technology, what are the hazards, everything they will expect you to, I personally look through all this, whether a document comprises of all these details. If somebody says it's a risk-free project, I will say that is the biggest risk. And what are your threats and vulnerabilities? What are your natural threats? What are your human-related threats? What are your technology-related threats? What are your socio-economic threats? And what are your vulnerabilities? Where are your weaknesses? So SWOT, all this will all have to be read in conjunction. A good business plan will have to necessarily comprise of all this very relevant information. Absence of all this is, that means you have not thought through on your business or you have not understood your business adequately enough. Next. Now, I mentioned to you about the compliance management, what is that Corporate Level Companies Act, FEMA, I told you about the Reserve, RBI, LLP, partnership. Then operations, you can have the Factories Act, Shops and Establishment Act, Copyright Act. Then you can, operation specific, you can have some this thing. Then on the labor, you have the Provident Fund, ESI, minimum wages, profession tax, bonus act, gratuity. You can list, you can go on, maternity benefit act, and it goes on and on. I'm going to give you some of this thing. Taxation, you have income tax, customs duty, and GST as a broad this thing. So don't lose sight of the compliance framework, because this is again how much you understand the regulatory framework of the business that you are proposing to be engaged is a reflection of your thinking through on your business. If you don't know of the existence of the legal structure in which you are going to operate, that means you are going to have significant weak spots in your own businesses. Now, I have always looked at it from the perspective of 4 P's of the product versus a new this thing, where the product is replaced by a solution, where the place is replaced by access, because in context of technology we need to look at those, where the price is replaced by value and where promotion is replaced by education. How much are you educating your customers on some of these parameters? Now, again, if you are looking at preparing a business plan, have a good cover sheet, corporate details, executive summary, mission, goals, business of the company, marketing plan, financial plan. Next. Business in brief, financial overview, financial requirement, key milestones achieved. Next. Okay, go ahead. So, even the structure of your business plan document needs to be well presented, neatly bound, spiral bound, or if you're having it in your internal document, have it in a file which you can keep replacing it with versions of the various points at when various milestones that you reach, because wherever people have gone back to their business plan and said, this is the business plan I started 4 years back, this is where it is, I have not, really not had major changes to make, I have found that their success rate is far, far higher. So, if you have any questions, I'm open to discussing them. Because I had provided a lot more time for interactions, to be honest. The interactions were much lower than what I had thought for. That's why my session got over ahead of time.
How do you usually do like you talked about project planning and the fund management?
So, you talked about the project planning and accordingly you plan for the funds. What is usually the time frame that you look at, and how do you usually go about funding? At what stage, for how much time frame? What would you suggest to a startup?
See, depends on, again, I don't want to avoid the giving a very specific thing, but ultimately it's a function of what your project is all about. What is the gestation period of the project? Suppose you can start a project in the next 6 months, if you understand, if the service, assuming it is a service, then you are up and kicking and running in, say, even 2-3 months, or even in probably in a week, as long as you are clear of where you are. But I would imagine that it's a function of what you are getting into. If it's trading, then you need to do a little more analysis, because you need to say which products you will sell this thing. You will analysis what is the market, who are the suppliers of it, what margins do you have, what are the risks. You will want to do analysis of more on that. If it's manufacturing, it is little longer. So it's a function of what area that you are proposing to get in. Services will probably be the least, provided it's initially dependent on you. But if initially itself you require 10 people, then you'll have to get them on board, then you'll have to train them, then you'll have to go, because you can't get a 10 people team without understanding what your organization stands for. You'll have to train. During that time you'll have to pay them. You'll have to keep them engaged. Somebody will leave in between. That's a dead cost. Yeah, like one fine day morning, 30 years back, I just chucked up my job, which I was working with TVS. I jumped. Next day morning, I was operational, because it was dependent on me, and I knew what I was getting into. Within 1 week, I started billing, and I had no problems. And that's exactly what I went and told my wife. It's either in service industry, either every day is a payday or there is no payday. See, all a function of what you are operating on.
I have actually 2 questions here. The first question is, I have a startup, and the research team is based out of Canada, and the operations team.
What's based out of Canada?
The research team. The R&D.
Okay.
The R&D team is based out of Canada, and the operations and the sales. My target audience is India. So the sales office and the operations office is based out of India. I've already registered the company in Canada, and the trademark application has gone through. But based on what I've heard and the advice that I've got so far, they have advised me to get or put through a trademark application for India again. Or what would be the best way to deal with this process? Because there's a lot of back and forth, and I've not been able to get a clear opinion on how to deal with this.
See, increasingly things like trademark, patents and copyrights are a specialized subject. I can put you in touch with people who work with startups and things like that. But the fact of the matter remains that while India is also a signatory and accepts global trademarks and this thing, it is never out of place to register it in India also.
And that takes me to my second question. While working on the financial aspects of the business plan, I have a question, because my startup is based on clean energy and renewable sources of energy, where I can avail a lot of subsidies from the government of India, and also through various aspects or various different legal entities. Would it be wiser to accommodate or account those subsidies when I'm working on the financial parts of business plan, or should I just leave it and count it as, or do it later?
See, my experience on this personally is, yeah, subsidies and grants that governments give is good to have. But again, these are all policy decisions which they can change at the drop of the hat. Today, somebody is positive about it, they'll start plowing in a lot of subsidies and incentives and things like that. And tomorrow they suddenly that something else comes up, this comes or goes out of the radar, they pull it out. If you start building business models around subsidies and grants given by the government of India, governments, I would personally think that that's a high risk category. Unless they are giving it at an advance and saying one time project based this thing, then you've taken the money and put it into your bag. But even there, because getting these grants itself takes sometimes 1 or 2 years, and so when it comes, it comes. Don't factor in it as your part of your project in the early stage. Suddenly you will find that you have factored in 20% grant, and that 20% is not come, so 80% where do you go? You can't go anywhere. So then you are borrowing and things like that. So you might as well factor in 100%. If this 20% comes ahead in advance, use it to repay it or use it for something else. But don't assume that to be part of your project cost, because that will cost you pain. Yeah, basically a selling price minus, suppose I'll give you from a trading perspective, very crude trading perspective. I buy something at 75 rupees and I sell it at 100 rupees. What is my contribution? 25. No, that's contribution. That is contribution. Out of that only you have to meet all your expenses. You have an office, you have some salesman, you have this thing, all that you'll have to meet. Suppose I tell you that my total monthly expenditure on the office is 10,000 rupees and I am making 25 rupees profit per unit that I sell. How many units will you have to sell to cover the 10,000 rupees? So 10,000 divided by 25 will be your minimum number of units that you have to sell if you have to break even. Now, if you sell less than 400 units, what will happen? It will go out of your pocket. If you sell more than 400, you will make profit. That 10,000 will remain static. So, to understand that is level unit level of economics, you will have to understand saying that this is the minimum that I have to earn, is that what is your contribution, what is your gross profit is very, very, very critical. Now, you take another case, I buy for 75, I sell for 100, but if I buy 100 or 500 units, 50 goes, I cannot sell, it is damaged, I cannot sell. Then your cost itself, you pay for 500 but you can sell only 450. So your 75 will become 10% more. So 75 will become 8250. You that is suddenly a lost sight of that. No, we go to a restaurant. Is he capable of exactly preparing enough food for what he is selling? He cannot. He will assume that X number of people are coming. Assuming that day in your Saidapet 10 people stand up and have a road roko there and no traffic comes into this part of town. What happens to the man who prepared it and kept it? There is a wastage. So you have to look at normal and abnormal type of situations to factor in your pricing. That is why unless you know what your variable cost is, you can never plan your pricing. Unit economics is must. That is where you will find that the roadside people, what I call them, the native intelligence is highest. They know business with no business plan, they know best.
which is not like going to grow in 3 years and is going to go down for like 7, 8 years. So what they should do, like.
I'm not suggesting that you don't look at a 7 or 8 years perspective. I will say that in today's context, you cannot give your business clarity for more than 3 to 4 years at a time, because you cannot plan for 8 years. That's what I'm trying to. So you will have to have, there will be an element of variability that will creep in during this period. Now, for instance, today the government is already saying after 2030 we will only want electric vehicles on the road. We will not allow fossil fuel vehicles on the road. That's a statement. If you are, yes, if you are a vehicle manufacturer, it takes you at least 10-15 years before you start making good and enough money. But that's why Maruti is making money. The money is oozing from wherever in their hands it is coming, because they put up the plant way back in the 80s. Now at those costs, half of which are subsidized by the government to bail out somebody. That's a separate part. Many of you are not even born at that particular point of time. But the fact of the matter is they have the advantage of very low costs selling it at current prices. Now whoever is coming is incurring costs at current prices.
What can be the deliverable for 3 years? Suppose we plan for something like 8 to 10 years. So if I'm talking to someone and proposing that this plan to someone, so what can be like?
So my way of looking at it is, out of the 7 years, remove your project phase. Suppose assuming that it takes you, construction phase itself, it takes you 1 year or 2 years. Then you are talking of the balance period only. I am talking of revenue phase.
Can I answer that? Are you guys involved in Hyperloop? So Hyperloop is at this point of time visual thinking. So your, I can understand in your case it is 7 to 8 years, possibly 10 years. So that's a different ball game altogether. It does not apply for 99% of the startups sitting here or guys who want to have startups. If you go to a typical investor and say that I don't know what I'm going to do for 7 or 8 years, it will be a very, very short conversation.
Unless he's an Elon Musk.
So the people who will listen to you for Hyperloop are very, very different kind of people. It's not your typical investor. The banks won't even let you into the front door.
Not even through the back door.
So fundamentally, we are talking typical startups. Now, typical startups, personally, even 3 years is too long a period. So let's sort of discuss your case separately as to who will fund you. So I'm sure when you decided that you want to consider Hyperloop, you must have had something in mind, you know? Unless Elon Musk is your uncle here and has $1 billion and it's a huge change and he doesn't mind investing in that. So there must be some thought process. Or it will come as grants, it will come as Chandrababu Naidu is willing to put some money in. So, but that will be unusual. It is not typical. I mean, here we are discussing typical.
Suppose we have the concept of Hyperloop that we want to include for some of the industry, like coal industry. So the coal industry, they can use the similar concept. Instead of creating the complete Hyperloop, we can provide a similar solution to those things. So that could be one of the startups, right?
Okay, so we have a minimum viable product.
Yes,
Or we have a prototype.
yes, we are creating those things.
Yeah, so once you have that, till then it is wishful thinking.
Yes, sir.
Once you have that, then you can go to somebody and say that these are my, so what is the value proposition you have? I mean, he must have said value 5 times. So what is the value? Because if there is a value proposition, see, nobody will invest in Hyperloop because it is a very fashionable word. Okay? So people will invest in Hyperloop or a variant of Hyperloop for industry because it is adding value to what they are doing. ultimately invest in Hyperloop between Vijayawada and wherever he wants to connect it, because there is value in it, not because it is nice to have Hyperloop. So you have to demonstrate the value. No? It may be easier to demonstrate value for moving coal. I don't know. First time I'm hearing of it. But it's interesting. Maybe offline I'd like to learn from you. How
Sure.
coal can be moved by
Actually, many things can be done for cargo, and we are figuring out slowly.
fair enough.
No, so if you're having a project or a product which has long gestation period, then the risks associated with also that changes quite dramatically. Because see, India has never been a great executor of projects. Let us face it. Even if you take the Chennai Metro rail, the first phase was to have been completed in 15 or 16. We are still not even, and I have at least had privy to some of the problems that they faced and the issues associated with that. Now that is at a government level. Believe me, that's and I, having looked at it so closely, you can't. I don't even want to dismiss that of saying that it is a government project. That's why it's like that. I was auditor for Chennai Metro Rail for 4 years, so I have had an option to see at the people working there and this thing. There's so many external factors that have come into play. Money was not an issue. It was funded by Japanese International Cooperative Agency. Everything was there, but that, the variables of so many things that suddenly tunnel, underground tunnel boring machine, they had come in from Russia, the ruble collapsed at that particular point of time. This fellow abandoned the project and went away. No, I'm saying, so the longer the project, the longer this thing, the government does it, the risks are different. But again, 3 years at a time is what I personally would look at, and I respect Gopal's view on that a lot, because in the case of a startup, they'll say, boss, will you survive at the end of the second year? Forget, because okay, if somebody is willing to look at something dramatic in the next 1 year, then that is also being unreasonable. So basically we are saying, you'll have to survive for 2 years, then you'll have to start. Then you will start thinking in terms of, okay, is there a pattern to your survival thereafter that you can plan?
Sir, when do we know that we can go ahead with the...
When do we know that we can go ahead with starting a company or LLP? At what stage?
See, initially keep it simple. Proprietary, keep it simple. Don't get into legal structures because there will be complications. When you have to start thinking of a serious legal structure is when you are acquiring assets or when your revenues start coming in. Okay. Even there, if you are the sole this thing, you can still go ahead with another 1 or 2 years more to get a lot more. But suppose there are 2-3 people involved, and at that particular point of time you are getting assets or you are getting revenues, that time it is better to create a legal structure, because that will avoid problems. If you are a sole person and nobody else is involved with you, you can keep it as proprietary as long as you don't have a problem. Except that as a proprietor, your exposure to external risks are higher, and whether you have the ability to absorb all of that is what you have to check. But if there is nobody involved with you, keeping it proprietary is not an issue at all, till you want to raise funds. When you want to raise funds, you have to think of a legal structure.
These days, you have even one-man private limited company.
Pardon?
You have an individual private limited company
Yeah,
also,
yeah.
I was told. So why should anybody do that? Maybe you might as well go on an LLP basis if you are a proprietor or what is the purpose of introducing that?
No,
Sir?
LLP.
Acha, for funding.
You come for IT incubation cell, they will say, go and get a bit
So it's better even if you are even if it is a one-man private limited
No, one
funding.
man,
and-
I say one man, personally I am not too enamored about it. Because it has more complications than it's this thing. So personally, you have a regular, if you don't require funding and you are not looking, keep it as LLP. If at some point of time you require even whatever it is, go to private limited company. This middle class is always a problem. See, once you get into see, private limited, don't get into private limited till you are very sure of your how certain you are in continuing with the business, because there are a lot of costs associated with even the existence of a private limited company. Whether you like it or not, a private limited company, if you want to keep it going, costs you nothing less than 50 to 75,000 rupees in terms of regulatory cost per annum. No, it hurts quite a few. So that's why I say, till you are sure about your business model, all that, this thing, you keep it simple, keep it where you don't have to incur too much in terms of costs. Because private limited companies, suddenly you will find that your professional will come and say, please do this thing, you have to pay, you have to remit at 5 to 10,000 rupees fees for filing these forms. For a startup, that 10,000 rupees hurts.
Sorry, just how many of you were here for session 1 and 2? Okay. Did you see any continuity from what was discussed in session 1 and what was discussed in session 2 to what was discussed today? It wasn't a rhetorical question. I am expecting some feedback. Yeah. There was. Was there different perspectives which came to you, or everybody you said same thing? No, no. We are going deeper, I know, on each subject. But some of the views I know were different. The fundamental message is the same, but there were different perspectives and different views. How do you process that, Jan? So, the reason why I raised this is that in business, and this is important for you all to appreciate it as already in startup or people planning to have startups, the students here, is that in business things are never black or white. If it is only black or if it is only white, any idiot can decide what is right. You don't need such high talent to figure out. It is, in business, it's always will be shades of gray. And this is actually what makes life interesting, what makes business interesting. Because there is no perfectly right answer, there is no perfectly wrong answer. The answer depends on the assumptions which you make to come at a solution. So the way he might approach it will be maybe different, maybe similar to the way I would approach it, or to the way Chandu Nair would have approached it, or the next speaker will approach it. So it is important to appreciate that these are perspectives. It is important to appreciate that the solution or the proposed solution depends on the set of assumptions. Am I making sense, or I'm using words which are absolutely... So can somebody react to this as to what I said?
Depending on the kind of business, for example, the time taken for product development, you will plan things differently.
So what you said,
Sit, yes.
so what you said, what you're trying to explain from what I understood, different people will have different perspectives depending on what knowledge they have, what is the data that they know, from what they would have understood from the customers, from how aggressive or how conservatively they would like to approach and enter the market. So by hearing different opinions and views, we can take, okay, these are the various assumptions which will affect this particular decision. And depending on your nature, the data points that you would have, you take certain decisions. What these sessions help us is, would probably be making us aware that these are the various things to be considered. And as long as we are aware, we would take a better decision. That's what should be the goal of these sessions.
Okay. And one last point I'd like to leave with you, and he touched on it indirectly, Chandu Nair touched on it directly, and I had touched on it directly, that a document or a presentation or a proposal, anything, should always be looked at from the eyes of the guy who is receiving it. We tend to make plans, presentations, documents, deck, fundamentally one size fits all. I don't think it works. What an investor wants to look at is different to what a customer wants to look at. Or what you want to even share with a customer is different with what you want to share with an investor. The basic plan may be the same. The framework which Venkat gave today is a framework, but it doesn't mean that you would put everything in that. And the way you would highlight, the way you would stress different aspects depends on who your audience is. He touched on this a couple of times, but did it indirectly. But I thought that it was important to mention that, so with your permission.
Yes.
So may I, on behalf of you, everybody here, thank Venkat, and I think
I'm always available. My mail ID rvk@rvkassociates.com. Anytime anyone has a query, please do mail me. I'll definitely be of revert back. That's something that I do. And if I don't revert in 48 hours, you can get back to me, because friends know me that I either react within 48 hours or don't react at all. And if you want my number, it's 98408 13918. So again, I have no problem. If I don't call, I'll call back for sure. I don't receive the call, I'll call you back.